Why is it every sissy pig fucker who strolls into my town expects me to smile and shout awful friendly? Welcome to Fallbrook. Only nugget of paradise in this entire law-forsaken land.
Hey everybody, so I about 2 weeks ago went down to Santa Monica to play a preview build of The Outer Worlds, and Blower this year because, Blood, you're interested in the game, but not only that, you saw the game at E3, and so we can kind of compare notes here based on what I experienced and what you saw at E3. And we always talk about it sometimes. You and I mention to each other it's hard sometimes to feel like you're doing an RPG justice during a preview.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, here are all these different paths, and I get to choose one option, or see one option. With the E3 demo, it was really funny because like, you can do this, this, or this, and we're going to be rotating those playthroughs for every demo that comes through here. And I'm like, and I only get to see one of those. Other people will get to see the other ones. Like, okay,
right, yeah, and I definitely got that sense with The Outer Worlds, and just it's a totally fine way to do a preview like this, but I got to play basically the beginning of the game, and then they, for like an hour, and then they fast-forwarded ahead, where they're like, here, we'll give you this character, and these are the decisions we made, and here you are in the world. And so it's like, it's nice that you get to see something that's a little bit farther ahead, but the negative to that is you don't really get to see that progression or how much your own decisions are affecting things, so it's not the best way to do it, but I will try to describe what I saw to the best of my ability. And I think focusing on the beginning of the game, what I really like is how interesting the world is from the outset and how kind of many choices they make you, they throw at you, or at least they do an effective job of giving you the illusion of choice. And in Outer Worlds, for those who don't know, it's like different parts of this galaxy are controlled by corporations. And it's pretty biting commentary right out the gate where, like, your ship crashes and you go and there's this guy in this cave and he's wounded and he's way more interested in giving you the sales pitch for this corporation that he works for than actually like addressing his wound or dealing with you. Or he's like, and he even says to himself, it's this nice funny moment where he's like, oh, right, nailed it. And he's critical of himself when he doesn't get it right. And so it's just, you get a good idea early on how much control these corporations have and how they kind of form the culture of this place and how they shape people and how people value themselves. I thought was interesting. And that was just a few minutes into the game. Like after the character creation, it's like, oh, I'm already getting these really interesting conversations. And something I think that you would want out of this game that it does a good job is you feel like you do immediately have a bunch of ways of dealing with people. It's not like really there's this long tutorial. They do kind of go over the buttons, like this is how you crouch, this is how you do all this stuff. There is that, but that is happening where it's like, okay, this guy, do I want to be a jerk to him or do I want to kind of like coerce my way into getting his gun? Do I want to use my speech skills to kind of schmooze ahead, or am I kind of the brute force type where it's like I don't take nonsense from no one and I'm charging forward? And so all of that juicy Obsidian RPG goodness is there immediately, which I really like. Is that how when you saw it at E3, I guess, how convinced were you of kind of the decision making and the writing and all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, they just dropped us right into a later mission, but I immediately felt like the characters I was seeing were a little bit more, like probably more from like an animation standpoint or whatever, but they just felt like a little bit more fleshed out, and like, yeah, like a character rather than just like a voice box,
right?
That I was interacting with, and they stressed too. One of the things that was interesting to me is they stressed too how your companion characters will play off of your decision making and stuff like that, which I feel like I haven't seen that much before.
Yeah.
Before it was like companions were just sort of like other things that you equip,
right,
rather than characters.
Right. And so kind of once you get through this opening tutorial where you meet this person who is giving you the company slogan and gives you your gun, not too long after that, there's another interaction that happens with the ship, but not too long after that, you can kind of go to your first major city. And immediately, it feels incredibly open-ended. And you get introduced to your first companion character, Parvati, and it's just like you instantly know what kind of game this is going to be based on the kind of first main scenario that you get wrapped up in, where you go and you talk to this guy and he's like, hey, I need you to do something for me. There are these people who kind of went off on their own and they were angry, and they're taking some of our power. I need you to give that power back to us. And he's like, if you help us out, we'll help you out. And he just seems like very matter of fact. Maybe something's a little off about him, but you can kind of understand where he's coming from. He's presenting one particular side of the story, and he sends your companion, Parvati, with you. And she's like, you're going down the elevator. And she's like, hey, that's not all there is to this story. I think that there's a reason why these people are doing this. There's a reason why they're angry. Like, you need to figure that out. And from there, what I really respect so far of what I've seen of Outer Worlds is it's not really holding your hand. It's not like, okay, you have to go and figure it out and sympathize with the other side. It's just like, go do what you want. If you want to go and you immediately want to grab that power and return it to the city, you can. If you do want to go and you want to empathize with those people, you can. And so it's just like you have multiple layers that you can go through and dig into, and depending on how you do it, you may feel totally different about the quest, which I think is really cool. And it's nice having companions in the sense that I got from Parvati. It's nice having companions that don't feel like you're just kind of molding them into whatever you want them to be. It's like Parvati feels a certain way about it. She doesn't want you to do this. She has her own stakes in it, and if you go against that, she might respond. Unfortunately, I didn't really have time to see how much you could make her upset. But when you said that their characters are not voice boxes, I think that was a very good summation. Where it's like, if you bring her along, you don't have to. You can just leave her in the office if you want. It seems like they're pretty concerned with giving you as much freedom as possible. But if you do bring her along, it's like, okay, I'm bringing along somebody who has their own opinion on this, and they're not just going to be okay with whatever it is I'm doing. And so that's really cool. But that was kind of all I got to see in that opening town. There wasn't, like, I got to explore a little bit, but I didn't get to see that quest even all the way through. And then we got skipped ahead. And I had another companion. And this one, it was less focused on the story and more of like, how much freedom do I have to explore this open world? How is combat going to be? And so in the second half of the demo, that's more what I was focused on. And the best thing that I want to say is I love it in games where you're like, I wonder if I do this, if this will happen, where like something kind of makes sense in your head, and then you just do it, and it turns into this whole thing. And so as soon as we loaded up that second save file, I was like, I'm going to talk to this new companion and see if they have a quest, and they super did. And they're like, hey, this is what I'm worried about. Do you want to help me out with this? And so the game not prompting me at all, just like me thinking that this would happen, Obsidian not telling me anything. I just talked to that second companion, this new companion who I didn't know, who I didn't recruit. I just had in the save file, and I got sucked into this quest and just went off and explored and did that. And so that was really neat. And again, kind of emphasizing like this game isn't pushing you. It's you can really make it whatever you want to be. And to talk about the combat, so I did a lot of fighting. And for those of you who aren't familiar, kind of a basic thing that you can do is there's this kind of VATS-like slowdown system. Where it's not stopping, but you're slowing down, and you have kind of this meter that drains, and it just allows you to more easily line up shots. So whether you're shooting their head or their arms or whatever, and you can do different effects depending on where you shoot them. And creature type was a very big deal because weapons that I would have be effective against humans would not be effective against machines.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And so I had a pretty wide arsenal in the save file, and it was nice being like, okay, I'm going to switch to this for this encounter. I'm going to switch here for that encounter. And like there were enemies where it's like if I shoot them in the head, I'll blind them. And that actually ended up being really, really effective where it's like, no, I want to, if I am going to slow down time, I do specifically want to blind them so they're not doing as much damage to me. And so that was really nice. And I went into town, and I think this is what you saw at E3, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I basically had to sneak into a factory.
Yeah.
And
I forget, it's some kind of pork type creature, right?
Yeah.
They're like growing tumors and farming the tumors, basically.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's some sort of like gross farming with pigs. I don't remember exactly what it is, but you need to get into this factory, and this lady wants you to kill this guy, and she's just so kind of like straightforward about it, where she's like, "Listen, man, I don't care how you do it. You can do it this way if you want, just whatever, just get the job done." And this was a great example of how an entire quest could go in the Outer Worlds, because I was like, okay, well, I want to try to be sneaky about it. And she's like, hey, go get this ID card from this guy. And I went to the shop next door and I got an ID card, and you totally don't have to do this. But then I went to the location and I couldn't figure out, like, okay, where's the front door to this place? And she mentioned, like, hey, if you want to go through the sewers and sneak in that way, you totally can. And so I went to the sewers and I found that entrance and I went through. And
so you basically did a combo then, because you weren't just being stealthy, you were stealthy plus disguise.
Right. And then before that, I went into this forbidden area with 2 robots, and they didn't like that I was there. And so I just killed them. And so it was like, I got the disguise, I was loud and killed some robots right outside their front door, and then I went into the sewers. And so I did kind of a combination of all 3. And so I wasn't kind of pigeonholed into one approach. It was just like I had an idea in my mind, and I adapted based on how the mission went. So that was cool. And then I got in, and I had this ID card. And what was interesting about having this ID card is there was this meter, and this meter would go down, and it was like the suspicion meter. And this wasn't really explained to me in the game, and so I don't have like this is exactly how it worked, but just based on my experience, it seemed like the way that it worked was it would go down, and then if I made eye contact with somebody, and so I had this ID card, and the meter went down, and somebody looked at me, and they're like, oh, wait, you look suspicious. And so I actually had to answer their questions, and it was kind of like in Dungeons & Dragons going through like a persuasion check or something, where it's like, hey, don't blow your cover. Be smooth about it. And so I did that successfully, and the meter filled back up. And I think you only have a certain number of times that you can do that, which I actually think is really cool. Again, I don't know the full intricacies of this disguise system.
Well, and I know that there's a lot that goes into the stats that you have and how those affect things. I know they showed us with the right speech stat, you can like actually get on the loudspeaker and like tell people to go home and that kind of thing, you know.
Right. I love that the sense that I was getting from this disguise system is it wasn't black and white, where it's like, okay, you have this thing, now you can go in and you're totally fine. I like that it's like you don't get a free pass like that, where it's like even if you get the disguise, you're still going to have to think about it. You're still going to have to rely on your other skills that your character has. It's not just like some key that you're getting. And that just felt like a really nuanced approach where I'm like, oh, why doesn't this happen more often? Like I loved that I just didn't solve a problem. That it made the mission more exciting, being like, oh no, like I got to get to this guy and not blow my cover. And so that was really neat. And I did find the guy, and rather than like trying to talk my way out of it or get more information from him, I just killed him.
Oh yeah, just straight up.
Yeah, I just straight up murdered him, and then just like ran out of the area.
Yeah, because that's interesting because he had some wordplay going on for sure. He kind of lets you warm up to him a little bit, and then you have these choices there of, okay, you can either try to, like you were saying before with the other quest, you can try to side with him,
right,
or you can try to somehow try to make everybody happy, which I imagine you've got to have like some perfect stat skills or whatever.
Right. And I love just in these couple of quest instances that we're talking about that it's like there's totally different ways that you can go. And the sense that I wasn't able to get in the preview, unfortunately, is like, okay, well now how do all of these different branches stack up on top of each other?
Right.
Like how long lasting are the consequences? Does it affect anything else out in the world?
Yeah, what is the core path even look like? Yeah, or are you just out there just doing random things and getting a reputation for it?
Right, and my playstyle was informed by the fact that I had a very limited amount of time, and but it was also kind of nice just being like, no, I don't want to know. I'm gonna kill him, and just like making it simple and like choosing to view it a certain way. I thought was cool.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too when you're not. when you're not 30 hours deep into a game like this,
right,
and you can just make whatever choice because it doesn't matter in the end.
Exactly, and that was definitely going on while I was playing. I was like, well, this isn't my save file. Like, I'm going to have to do this all again. So, yeah, it does play into it. There is kind of one negative that I want to bring up.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a negative that I have some doubt on because, I don't know if it's just me jumping into this save file and feeling this way, or it is actually indicative of how the game will play out. And that is the way encounters are structured. And so I was trying to get to this factory and just moving around and going to the city and just kind of exploring. I felt like the enemies weren't placed with a great amount of care. And I don't know if it was just this area and these bugs that I was fighting where it's like, this is how they are. But it just kind of felt like, okay, you'll get into a fight. Here's a cluster of enemies. You deal with them. You walk 10 feet. Here's another cluster of enemies. You deal with them. And it just was like, I like some of the different elements that play with the combat. I like the slowdown. I like the body targeting. I like doing specific effects to them. I like the different weapon types being effective. But when they're so clustered together like this, it gets a little monotonous. And I wasn't playing the game that long, and it felt like it was getting tedious. And I think the other thing that contributed to that is your companions have abilities that they can do. And it's one of those things where you go and you see them do the animation, like shoot the gun or run forward and do a big attack. It was like, this is cool, but like, and it's really useful. Like I in terms of damage, I felt the incentive to do it. But it was just like the fourth time I saw the animation, it was like, this isn't.
Sure. Because it's taking control away and you're just watching.
Right. It's just like you kind of cut to them and they do their thing. It's kind of like in Fallout when they will do the effect where it's like, oh, this is you exploded them with your shot kind of a thing. It was like kind of a glory kill. But I don't know if it was because
you're not getting the glory kill. You're just watching it.
You're just watching your companion do it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's not that big of a deal on its own, but combined with the fact that I felt like I was kind of fighting all the time, it exacerbated it. And I don't know if you can turn that off where it's like you can make that animation quicker or something like that. I'm not sure if there's a setting like that, but it was kind of the one major concern that I walked away from with the Outer Worlds, where I'm like, I'm not sure the way that this is tuned makes it enjoyable to explore.
Right.
And I don't know if that means like I'll get so tired of combat that I'll just kind of want to fast travel over the place, or by the time it releases, they will have smoothed all this over. I don't know. But that was kind of the one thing that I walked away from.
Yeah. One thing that I'm a little bit curious about is, this is Obsidian's game, but it's being published by this new publisher, Private Division.
Yeah. Did
you get any kind of sense of like, what this company's approach is, because I think this is like one of their first games, essentially. Like, whether they have any kind of direction or leading with what Obsidian's doing, or they just like, Obsidian, we'll just put your game out there for you.
Right. It's an interesting question, Blood. And to tell you the truth, like, beyond acknowledging it, this just felt like Obsidian doing their Obsidian thing.
Yeah.
There was there was nothing that felt dramatically different about it to me. There were so many things that when you're playing it, it's like, yeah, of course this is a decision Obsidian would make, or the way that they present the story or the jokes that they tell. I didn't see any strong influence, positive or negative, as a result. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As somebody who enjoys Fallout, and I think as somebody who has a respect for Obsidian games, is there anything that you're kind of looking for in the Outer Worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about it a lot, but it's just that sense of choice and dialogue, and like how everything kind of interconnects, and like just these weird ways that you can play, and the permutations of all these different choices working together. Mm-hmm. And I think just doing that in a way that feels natural, more than anything, and so that you and I can kind of come out of this and just tell different stories about what happened, just like we were talking about this factory situation.
Right.
It's like, okay, is there somebody out there that can actually make these two people that hate each other like get together with some charm skill or something, and how that works, or how nonviolent can you be with some of these runs, or how stealthy can you be? And I remember there was a time in Fallout 3 where I was having a really hard time like getting into one of these enemy camps. So I just snuck around and pickpocketed all the ammo out of everybody, and they couldn't shoot me now. So there we go.
Yeah, I think in a world that is so large and you're trying to make so many quests intricate, I think it is difficult, like, having you care about all your companions, or like everybody serving their own distinct purpose, where it's like this guy is this type of personality. And I think that's something that I walked away impressed with the Outer Worlds. It didn't, like, obviously I think when you have corporations ruling outer space, you expect a certain type of commentary. Like, you go in expecting certain type of jokes. And something that I was impressed by is, like, even going in with that expectation, they found a way to make it funny. They found a way to not go after the obvious thing. And that's something that Obsidian is constantly praised for, right? Is having that level of wit and writing that really just kind of cuts to you. Like, there were moments seeing it where I felt like I was like, oh, like that is like I had to stop and recognize it. Like, oh, that's legitimately pretty funny. And I love in any RPG where you can just get so much joy just from talking to people. It doesn't really matter. You don't need the combat to be amazing. You don't need it to be the best looking game. But if you can just go and talk to somebody and want to tell your coworker about it, I think that's a pretty huge achievement.
Yeah.
So for sure, excited to play more. Again, frustrated where like you always have kind of that seed of doubt in the back of your head where it's like, well, okay, how is this really going to play out over the course of an entire game? But it definitely left, I would say, overall a strong impression. And yeah, thank you for talking about it with me.
Yeah, and thanks to Obsidian and Private Division for letting us come out and check it out.
Yeah.